And welcome back into another new episode of Tribal Council Chat here on the Reality Realm Network. As always, we are your hosts. My name is Bruce Heller. You want to repeat that real quick? I mean, they know who you are, but
My name's Purnell.
there it is. And you want to go ahead and introduce today's episode for us?
So this episode is gonna be kind of like when we did challenges a couple of weeks ago. We were talking about our favorite and most influential Survivor confessionals. So we picked our top 10 confessionals that for us personally, each host has. We've also picked a few others that you could classify as like honorable mentions or just something we wanted to bring that maybe wasn't worthy, but is certainly confessionals that we remember over the franchise and should be a great week. Also, if you disagree with our top 10, I mean, by all means, tell us in the comments what you would like to hear. I know Bruce and we both know quite a bit about Survivor, but at the same time, especially when dealing with like there's so many new ones in every episode that many great ones are probably bound to pass our minds. But here we go.
Yeah, and I didn't necessarily do most influential. I just kind of did 10 favorites that I have, and like I can't say my list is in order because I've been super, I've been super busy this week, and I just kind of did a little bit of research at a time, so I have just a randomly ordered list. But I'm excited for this.
Yeah. So if we want to start then, I'm thinking so your list is just your 10 favorites, just to confirm.
Yeah, kind of, or at least that I
So let's
remember. Like you said, I'm sure a lot slipped our minds, but
start with at that point with where we want to go with our 10. And then maybe around like right before we get to the end, around like 2, 3, at least I can go through a couple that didn't fit my top 10, but I thought deserved a point in this program.
yeah, for sure.
It's kind of a separate second segment list, but we won't make that into an entire segment.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Bruce, you want to go with us? Like we said, they're not, but whatever one you want to bring up first.
Um, okay, so here is one from Cochrane and Caramone, and part of this is just because it's funny, but also is I love the flavor it references. It's I would say Julia has a vanilla personality, but that would be doing a great disservice to the flavor of vanilla. People actively seek out vanilla flavored products. I don't see anyone claiming for Julia flavored anything. Which for Cochrane this feels pretty harsh, but it's funny.
Yeah,
And I love vanilla Coke and vanilla flavored things. So that also is why this made me laugh.
yeah, that was a good one. I laughed when I saw that. Well, and it refreshed me. I thought you might be going to one of my honorable mentions already because I do have a Cochrane quote in there, but we'll find out what it is near the end.
There's a lot of those. He's great. He's hilarious.
Yeah, no, that's a really good one, and it's interesting too because, like he says in that season, Julia's just kind of there.
Yeah. Well, that's like half of the fans tribe, though. Yeah.
It's funny. I always say Micronesia is fans versus favorites. Karamoan is sort of fans versus sort of favorites.
Yeah. Former players versus people that are just there. Still an entertaining season because you have Cochrane
Oh
and
yeah,
Malcolm and Andrea. I mean, you
yeah,
also have Philip, but any entertainment from that season does not come from the fans tribe, basically.
absolutely. So it's a funny kind of like you did because I think this might be the only funny quote on my list. The other 9 of my top 10 are more ones that influence game. specifically this season, but also kind of a lot of them contributed to the game as a whole and how people see it. But that means that with the one funny one, we're going to start trying to Little Islands.
Hmm.
And that's my grandma's sitting at home watching Jerry Springer right now.
Yeah,
I I mean, who other than Sandra saw that coming, and the way he articulated it, just perfect on brand for Johnny Fairplay.
I still hate this move from him, and I always will. But it's an iconic moment in show history. That confessional is an iconic line, along with Thunder D saying "She died, dude." I hate the move, but it's iconic and it's funny. So
Just thinking that's interesting because you mentioned that you hate, and I am on the complete opposite. I just remember, have we ever done a Pearl episode?
I don't think we have.
So maybe that's something that needs to happen in this
Yeah, maybe.
DVD set so I can watch it, even though it's not on Paramount Plus in Canada.
That's weird that it's not.
30 and above is on Paramount Plus up here.
Huh. So going forward, I'm gonna edit my list on the fly a little bit here since it's not. I mean, I have it numbered, but it's not in an actual order. I am
Okay.
going to throw a Johnny Fairplay quote out here. That's after he and Sandra got into a big argument, and the quote from him was, "She won't be one of the final two, and I have $1 million that says she won't be the final one." Which is funny knowing I watched this season knowing she had won, so this just makes him look dumb to me, which is kind of funny. But their rivalry was really incredible, really good television, one of the iconic rivalries in the show. And I wish he would have been on Heroes versus Villains because having her on a tribe with him and Russell at the same time, what are known as her two biggest rivalries, would have been incredible television.
Yeah, that would have been amazing. Yeah, too bad he wasn't there. That's a great quote, especially knowing what happens in the end, and that Sandra is the not even by herself, single-handedly dispatching her play from the game. When if she does the other decision, he probably wins the game, and this would have probably also been in the episode because it would have been correct. So it's funny no matter what happens.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. So moving on, I'm going to do in my number 9 spot one of your favorite players, and that's an Amanda Kimmel confessional.
Oh, nice.
And right prior to this confessional, James is making a biblical reference relating to the Garden of Eden, where he says, "Don't eat the apple. We're going to go to the final four." And Amanda goes to confessional and says, "I don't want to bite the apple. I'm ready to bake the whole friggin' pie." That's right before she blindsides him with two immunity idols, one of the best blindsides of all time.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I love it. Obviously, China is my favorite season. She's one of my two favorite players of all time. But yeah, it's she was ready to go. It was and she really drove that vote to get him out, which was huge. And it's really her and James are really the only we've seen players be on multiple seasons together. We've really only seen one pair work together and truly be close allies across multiple seasons like that every time. And they did it across three, and I don't think we'll ever see that again.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I submitted this really as my first game quote to be on the list because it really does show that element of the game where while it's so easy to say, let's have a four go from day one to the end, if you don't think that you can beat somebody, you have to find a way to get rid of them. And Amanda knew that. She maybe should have done the same thing with Todd, but
Yeah.
At the same time, she came into final knowing with a chance to win. Whereas in that season, I would say if James gets to the end, at least from what we saw when he was in the game, that James was a lock to win.
Yeah. Who knows? My next one is, it's funny, but the reason I love it is just because it's a great example of storytelling and illustrating for the audience. And it's from Kagion, where Wu, let me find it. Wu says, quote, "I'm gonna pull something out of my arsenal, which is my ninja stealth mode." And if you're watching on YouTube, he does the arms that I'm doing. I pick up his pants, and it out falls an idol clue. And who's gonna pick that up and give it back to him? No way. I hightail it. Boom. Sonic the Hedgehog style. I'm cruising through the jungles. Zoom, zoom, zoom. There's no way he's catching me. Long confessional, but great storytelling by Wu here. I love it. He really knows how to paint a picture with his words. And with
Yeah,
the
absolutely.
ninja stealth move, his arms.
Yeah, absolutely. Great confessional here. It's one that I had on my list for a while. I dropped it at the end. So that's good. It's at least one that could come up anyway without us repeating. But no, excellent confessional, great storytelling. Wu uses his personal experience with martial arts and his passion for video games right into his confessional, which just builds his character so well. And while he may have made the one strategic error at the end that cost him the game, Wu has to be the best character of this season, probably right followed by Morgan. And then we get
Yeah, I don't know if I can name a single best character. And we should have thought of this when we had Samson on, because I would have been interested to see the names he mentioned, because he was there.
yeah.
Wu's funny. Tony is hilarious. The llama noises thing is always funny. Tony is just, his paranoidness makes him hilarious. Morgan's funny. Cass is a fun character. I don't know if I can pick one best character from that cast.
Speaking of though, something else we haven't done, maybe next off season, a characters episode as opposed to actual strategic skills.
Philip, Coach, those types. I was watching a lot of YouTube videos about just confessional clips earlier in the afternoon, and there was so many in a row of just Tyson talking about Coach. It was hysterical.
So moving on from there, to go to the first of my two Boston Rob quotes, or Boston Rob confessionals in this. I have one from Redemption Island, which is this one. I have one from Marquesas coming up at the top of the list. But this is, I've been on enough rewards to know that when you win one, there's a clue. So immediately it hits me. The cookies are a cylinder shape. There's a clue wrapped up like a cookie. As it's especially talking about pesto on her sandwich and not paying attention to the game. Really, it's what you'd expect between the game of Boston Rob in Redemption Island and the game of Ashley and Natalie in Redemption Island contrast there. And then he says, but it doesn't matter because I already have the idol. So bye, right to the volcano.
I had this one on my list too. This is great. I love it because it just encapsulates why I like Rob so much and why he's such good television. Is that he can be funny and entertaining and have a smile on his face while being so freaking cocky and arrogant at the same time. And it's just such a weirdly great balance with him. And
Oh, it is.
I get why people love him. I get why people don't. Some people don't like him. He's such a good character though.
Yeah, absolutely. Great character. I think it's so fitting that at that point that it's showing you like that contrast that Natalie and Ashley and Philip are talking about food. Meanwhile, Rob is saying, I'm already 5 steps ahead of them. I need the clue that they can't find. I already have the idol.
Yeah.
He just ran that season from day one, watching what's her name, the police officer who went home early, I forget, all the way to final tribal council where it wasn't even close. And when you saw Zapatera have, and yes, I'm well aware that the reputation of Rob and the reputation of Russell coming into this season were very different. But at the same time, Zapatera threw a challenge to get rid of Russell because he was seen as that experienced player who's already done the game and they knew how he was going to play. Ometepe just let Rob walk into the beach and said, "It's your game now. Have fun with it."
And the thing is, in my opinion, just seeing how both of these tribes were, this would have happened. Both tribes would have acted the same way if the returnees were reversed.
Yeah.
Zapatera had no interest in playing with a returnee, and Ometepe was just kind of so rose-colored glasses kid in the candy shop about it that they would have been the same way with Russell and let him be in charge, I feel like.
If Russell was in charge, it looks like it was switched. I think we would have seen a similar game to Samoa or to Redemption, oh sorry, to Heroes for Villains. But instead of it being, what was her name? We would have just seen Rob stick with Natalie and Russell stick with Natalie and Ashley and go to the end and probably get beat by Ashley.
Yeah, probably. Oh,
I'm not sure Russell losing 3 seasons in a row, or 3 seasons out of 4 that he thought he should have won.
yeah. And that would have been entertaining both for Russell fans and non-Russell fans, as you get to see him go to the end, but the people that don't like him don't have to see him win. So everyone wins. my next. So you threw out a China quote. I'll return the favor and throw out a quote from one of your favorite seasons, Co Wrong. And it's from, and I like this one because sorry, by the way, I keep stumbling over my words. I'm really tired, but it's does a great job describing this middle position in the game. And I mean, the swing position is something that happens every Survivor season, multiple episodes. Someone finds themselves in the middle. And so this is by the great juror, Nick. I forget his last name.
Mariano or something.
See, he's such a good juror. We can't even remember his last name. Just messing with you. But he's at this point, him and the Beauty Tribe are kind of caught in this war at the early merge between brains and brawn. And he says, it's like the pretty girl at prom. You either leave with the quarterback or the valedictorian. It's a fun position to be in. It's fun being the pretty girl. I've never felt like a pretty girl before, but now I do.
It's a great confessional. Because it's true at the time. Emerged. It was a bit different when they knew Julia was coming back, and as a result, we saw Anna get voted out. But once they merged, Beauty was really in that position where no matter what Nick and Michelle and Julia and I decided to do, they were all going to go somewhat deep in the game.
Yeah, for sure. Because brains and brawn were very tunnel vision and only wanted to focus on taking shots at each other.
Yeah. It's just they were two different of tribes. No way they were going to work together. Aubrey just seemed to gravitate be opposites, moving apart instantly after they were on the same beach.
Yeah. And if you look at Braun, Scott, and Jason were who they were. They weren't necessarily the type of people that a ton of people wanted to work with,
Yeah.
both based on interaction with them and reputation that they had built up in the pre-merge.
I mean, if you have someone like Julia who was able to go, she had a possibility of winning by working with them if it worked out.
Yeah, and unfortunately it didn't, but oh well.
It worked out just fine.
Well, yeah, I meant for Julia.
Yeah. And don't worry about mixing up words. I'm doing the same thing, but neither of us are doing them as bad, mixing up our words as bad as somebody else tonight.
Yeah, but it's what is your next one?
To be one of two here that I have from all the way back in season one. And I think season one produced a lot of great, memorable confessionals because, one, as we've talked about before, that cast wasn't playing the game, that cast was building the game.
Yeah,
And the other thing that goes well with it is because it was filmed so differently and it was so much more like watching a documentary and not watching a TV show. Borneo has so many more of just players being honest and saying what is really on their mind as opposed to constantly being worried about every single thing going on in the game and being paranoid about it, that it's kind of created more drama, and then that we see twists coming in and throwing everything off. Borneo was very straightforward in that way, but it made a lot more honesty that you could pick out of, okay, this is what this person is really thinking right now. And I'm going to start off with one that was about 10 minutes into Survivor. I'm a good survival wise. People wise is a bit more challenging, but I've got the $1 million check already, Richard Hatch.
yeah,
And this quote I think is great because it really shows you how Rich is approaching this game. Most people are worried about, we got to make shelter, we got to build fire, we got to go dig a toilet, we got to find food. Rich knows that all of that he's not going to die out there in the worst case of scenarios.
yeah,
At, at the end of the day, it's one, and as we'll say through every season of Survivor, it's not the physical elements that are the hardest part, it's the people. And Rich saw that on day one, season one. And from there, it's not so much the he even knew he could do that. He was that confident he was going to win. But then it builds into the scene that we get right after this confessional that ties into it so perfectly. And if you've ever watched the commentary version of on the DVD set, where they have Jeff and Rich talking about the premiere, episode one, together in a room somewhere in CBS in Los Angeles, you have a neat scene where Jeff says himself and Mark Burnett and all the producers sat around when they saw Sue tell Rich, we work while we talk, action. They're like, oh my God, we got a show. And this just really built into it perfectly as Sue was playing the physical game. Rich was playing the social game when no one knew what the social game was.
yeah, exactly. It's funny when you thought you said you had two Borneo quotes. There's one Borneo quote that I came across on YouTube but didn't put on my list because I knew, well, in my head I thought I know he'll use this one. So we'll see if I can get to honorable mentions, and if that one hasn't been said yet, I'll share it. But it was neither of those two, surprisingly.
Who says it?
Rudy,
I have a Rudy quote coming up, so you probably do.
you've referenced it more than a few times on the show, so I'm sure you did.
That's it.
So let's see here. I will throw this one out next. Just kind of, it's a great example of how the game can give you personal growth and kind of show you who you are. and it's from Natalie Bolton. Now I'm getting to have a lot more fun and getting to be more myself, which is proving to be pretty ruthless, pretty stone cold bitch, and pretty cutthroat. And I have a smile on my face while I do it. And I can't remember or not. She also has a confessional about flossing someone's teeth with her jugular, and I don't think it's this
No,
confessional.
it's not
It's
this
that
one.
same episode.
That's one I think she was referring to Eric later in the season. This
Yeah,
one she's referring to Jason.
but this one and that and the jugular one kind of give off the same vibes of just the character growth we see from her throughout the season. Because she starts the season off kind of quieter, and this is where she reaches by near the end of it.
If we can get any player from that like 10 to 19 range on 50, it should be Natalie. We
Yeah,
need to see her get a chance to play again. She was such a great character, knew the game. This is just a perfect confessional in that she can envision exactly what's going to happen with her. I think it kind of ties into to Penner's confessional earlier in the season that didn't make my list, but that I'll always remember of you don't want to play against the Boston Red Sox, you'll get your ass handed to you.
that was
In
on
that,
my list.
oh, is it? And that's that, in my opinion, how Natalie handles this and why I tie the two together. She was such a great player and went as far as she could until she was playing against Parvati, Amanda, and Suri. And at that point, as a fan, thanks for coming.
That's a great point. Well, and Eric could have made it to the end, like as a fan.
Yeah.
I feel like if he doesn't pull off the single dumbest move in the history of the show, what stops him from going on a run the next couple immunities? But that's a great job tying Natalie to the famous Penner confessional, though. I never thought of it that way.
So you talked about a personal growth confessional. I'm going to go with one as well here, and this is from Cambodia, and it's Kimmy Kappenberg.
Hmm.
When she's talking about Monica Padilla, and she says, she's like, oh, leave them in the ocean. And then Kimmy pauses and goes, because we're going to deplete the entire ocean of food. I just have to remember I'm older, wiser, and need to practice self control. This is amazing compared to how it flashes back to Kimmy in Australia. Because Kimmy in Australia would have been against spearfishing because what, as Monica says, it might deplete the ocean of its resources. And Kimmy in Cambodia is a, compared to her Australia game, is a better strategist, is a more mature player, and really with this confessional, kind of shows to the audience, guess what? I'm a different person. I've grown, and now I'm here to win. I'm not here to be a premature like I was back then.
Yeah, the thing with this one that makes me laugh is when she decides to not make an issue of it with Monica. I would just love to see Alicia Calloway's reaction watching that scene. Who
That would have been epic.
Alicia and Kimmy both, neither one of them wanted to drop it over a freaking chicken, and both of them insisted on making an issue out of it for some reason. So that is growth from Kimmy over the years. So good for her. So my next one is a Sesternino quote. That it's funny because it's witty and it's him. And I started watching Amazon a few weeks ago, and I watched like the first 2 episodes, and I haven't watched since because I've been busy. But this is where he says, where did I have it written down? Coming into this game, the only spears I knew about were Brittany, broccoli, and asparagus. No deep reason for putting that on here other than just it made me laugh.
Yeah, that's a good one. Um, Rob has a lot of great confessionals this season. Certainly one of the best characters we saw in Old School Survivor, who also really knew this game so well, even at first season 6. I mean, I'm just having kind of now that you mentioned Rob, I mentioned season 6, and it's Rob. Like I'm like, my God, Rob, Jenna, Heidi, Matt. That was 40 seasons ago. I
Yeah.
remember watching that live.
Also, the Rob confessional of him talking about Matt sharpening the machete for an hour, where he theorizes that Matt might have a plot to try and kill them.
Was in my honorable mentions. So great. Let's just talk about it now too.
I just
Um,
thought of it just now, but when you said Matt's name, but it's hysterical.
yeah, those were hysterical. Um, so much that Rob had to offer the game. And it's too bad we saw him go home so early on his second attempt because he's someone I think could have really gone far maybe if he was on another tribe.
Yeah. But alas, Shapiro only had room for one person named Rob. So,
Yeah.
and the other one ended up running the entire season with an iron fist. But Sesternino on one of the other two tribes would have been interesting.
That's true.
I'm trying to think, was Shapiro the only tribe that didn't have a former winner on it?
Yeah, you're right. It was. Which is really bizarre as to why they did that. You have 4 winners. Why aren't you splitting them up a bit?
Well, swap Sesternino and Ethan, I'll say then. Because Boston Rob and Ethan are really great friends and they are now. I don't know if they were back then. They're from Ethan's from around the Boston area, I believe, or in the New
Yeah.
England area.
He
So,
was playing soccer in New England at the time. He's originally from New York, but
but yeah, that would.
I mean, could you imagine if they swapped though Amber on a tribe with both Rob in season 8 and with her ex? Like this is straight out of the challenge 30
I I
seasons earlier.
I forget Amber and Ethan were a thing until I every now and then see the picture of the two of them at the Amazon reunion together. But Ethan on a tribe with his ex while being on a season with Jenna Maraska, who he goes on to date for years and years. So my next one is a Courtney Yates quote. What?
I think it's mine first.
Oh, it is you. Never mind. Sorry.
That's okay. I'm gonna go with the Rudy quote now since I think we already brought it up. Um, but that is Rudy Boesch in season 1. The hardest part's hanging around all these young kids. I don't even know what MTV means. I'm used to being in the military, but they're not going to do that. There's more of them than there is of me. I've got to fit in. I think this is just brilliant. This
Yeah.
is say people can say whatever they want about some of the great social game players of all time. Rudy started the social game. As crazy as that sounds to be, because in the first couple episodes, it looked like, oh, this guy has no chance. He's going to be thrown out of here so fast. He's breaking things. He's leaving a mess around camp. And no, he manages to fit in with people, find his alliance, step out of his comfort zone, as seen in some other things, in working with people that he would have never worked with on the outside, like Rich and Kelly. And he doesn't let the two of them being from such different lifestyles than him come into his impact of their character, and they're very successful.
Yeah. It's a great one from him. I love that he says, I'm the one that has to adapt and fit in, not them. It's a very smart quote from him.
It's one that I've always said, like, when I've trained people in other things, whether it be campus leadership, be politics, be as employees, I've showed this quote to people many times. And I'm like, this is exactly how you're going to be successful. If I was, for example, training somebody to be on the board of directors of a students association that I've sat on, because I'm like, I think it's a great example of that in that I've used it too for myself in that if I was when I was in college, I represented a campus of 18,000 people. They all don't have the same interests as me, and neither does your tribe and survivor.
Yeah, for sure. And so that's, yeah, just fantastic stuff by him. And like you said, lays the blueprint for what becomes known as the social third of the game going forward. And it's still, the social part is still a very important pillar of the game 46 seasons later. My next one is a Courtney Yates confessional, which there's about 1,000 of those that I could put on this list between her 2 seasons, which is kind of impressive considering she's like the first or second juror on her second season, and technically went pre-merge, I think, because Heroes versus Villains did this thing where people made the jury like the last two pre-merge boots for some reason. Her and Coach
Yeah.
both, I think.
Rob was just short.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, Rob as a juror with Russell at the end would have been fantastic.
Yeah.
But the Courtney quote is, "It's no secret that Russell has a little boy crush on Parvati because come on, he's like a bandy-legged troll that scampers," and she does like this with her arms, "scampers around with a tooth missing, and Parvati pays attention to him, and she has no, in Courtney's words, has no trouble flirting with clearly anything that walks," and emphasizes any. This is, it's funny. It's not the only part of her game like some people think it is, but flirting was a giant part of Parvati's game.
Yeah.
And so Courtney pointing it out like that, but also kind of pointing out that Russell was kind of just following her around and she completely took advantage of that. And I don't know. The inflection on anything makes me laugh for some reason.
This is a great one. Courtney expresses it through television so well. And it is true. Somebody does have that skill that she can use in the game to even non-romantically flirt with pretty much anyone just to get one step forward.
Yeah, for sure.
And as somebody who has taken an online course with her and knew her on and knows her like on a first name basis that way through Zoom, I don't even think it's necessarily in a romantic way that some people would use that term, but Poverty just has this natural skill to connect with people.
Yeah, for sure.
And that is what she is so good at this game. And we're going to get into another series soon, right before we get into 47. But one of the best of all time.
Yeah, for sure. So what do you have on tap next?
Next, I have a Natalie White quote from Survivor Samoa. She only got 14 confessionals in a game winning season. That is just edited so unfairly. But of those 14, I have to pick one that I think is probably something that we often see get a bit underrated and undervalued by the fan base. But if you get that $1 million check, who cares what people say online? And that's Natalie saying, some people underestimate me and I want them to think like that so they'll take me to the end and then I'll use it to my advantage. If it comes down to me or him, I know I'm going to beat Russell. And within that few seconds, she is able to read her jury so well to know that Russell is not going to get the $1 million. So, yes, you want to work with him and make him feel in control no matter what.
Yeah. So, because we've shared we had a couple in common, this is the last one on my list. And you had two quotes from Hatch on one entry earlier. I am bringing two quotes from another winner on here. I've got my Reba buff on here. So I've got two D quotes here that just kind of, I like them, but they showcase just the type of game that she played and the level of dominance. And I'll explain more when I read them. But the first one is, we have to vote out Caleb. I feel like Austin won't want to vote out Caleb because he'll want to keep the big threats around, and that benefits him. But I feel like I'm in the position of power, so that's what we are going to do. If we get him out tonight, no one will be against us. Caleb is a goner. Boy, bye. Caleb goes home that episode, and keeping Caleb would have probably been better for Austin's game. Austin voted Caleb out anyway, I'm pretty sure.
He did. Everyone did.
And oh, was that when he was safe anyway, though?
Yeah.
But my second one is, and this is like a confessional right after I believe Kendra threw Dee's name out there a little bit, and the confessional is, in this game, whoever throws out my name, I'm gonna come for them and come for them hard. And this was like the first or second example of this happening where we saw someone say Dee's name, not even like we should go after them, but hey, maybe we go after this person, and then they go home that episode. So
yeah,
those two together just to display games like Dee's, like Rob's, like Kim's winning game that are just completely and utterly dominant. I mean, like I mentioned, Austin would have been better off trying to keep Caleb, keep the threats around because he was one of them. He did this because she talked him into it. There was a few times people actively played in her best interest other than her own, but she was also great socially and physically also, not just strategically. So, and the same thing with Rob and Kim.
Yeah, these two are great confessionals here. So dominant from kind of 1 to day 26 in this case. And no question that Dee was going to win the game. She really had her thing made all season. It's impossible to deny.
Can you repeat that last little bit? You were spot in it.
So I said, had her pretty much made all season. I couldn't think of a better way to wrap up this, at least from your end, by having two quotes from such a dominant game and two confessionals from her.
Yeah, and it's fitting that this came from me because she's my favorite New Era player too. But okay, so what's your next one before we get into the honorable mentions?
Well, I still have I did that one minutes ago, so I still. I'll do one more and then we'll get into a few honorable mentions. Let's go with my other Rob one now. And this goes all the way back to young Rob in Survivor, maybe didn't make it. We knew, but there was no question that bringing Rob back for All Stars, despite his early exit, Rob was probably a game changer in the history of Survivor that just took how to play the game strategically to a totally new level and didn't just make alliances, but made alliances with everybody and broke them when they best fit him. And he was maybe a bit too far ahead for his time in more cases, and that caused him to go home early after Sesternino and Bryan and Fairplay, he was more in line with the game in All Stars, but his jury management was just too far off because of his strategy that caused him not to win. And then by the time he comes back and plays in Redemption Island, everyone will just eat this up. And then when he comes back in Winners at War, everyone knows his game already, and new school players like Sarah and another player I'm about to make a quote from right after honorable mentions knew exactly what to watch for and managed to take him out.
Yeah, for sure.
So this is Rob's confessional. Fear keeps people loyal. If they're afraid of you, they'll do whatever you tell them to do. That's straight out of The Godfather. And he just fits his persona in this season when he uses that reference to the famous movie, that like Italian mob boss in Massachusetts, perfectly as he's saying it.
Yeah, for sure. It's a great quote from him, and it's accurate to how he plays the game. And it didn't work on his last season because he was trying to do that with a group of people that had won the game
Yeah.
and had more experience than anyone he had played with before. But so, but it's great.
So moving into a couple of honorable mentions. Um, I'll go with the Cochrane one that I mentioned, and then I also have one that we haven't that wasn't on your list. Well, two that aren't on your list, so I still went over them. I started with about four on this list, but we won't go over what we already talked about. So I'm going to start with the Cochrane one that I mentioned, and then we'll go into my only new era confessional that made the list. So, well, that even made the honorable mention list. There is no new era confessionals on my top 10, but I had to put one as an honorable mention for a great character. But starting with Cochrane, one thing that everybody talks about in terms of South Pacific is how overtly religious this season is, and how Coach has everybody praying at some points and doing meditation at other points, and that alliance was just really well up. Besides the winner, was really all in this whole almost cult-like experience. But the one thing I picked out, because this confessional, I don't. Well, I mean, it had to have been said before they filmed Caramoan, because the whole season was edited before Caramoan. But it's so perfect once you've already watched Caramoan too. And this is John Cochrane saying Brandon seems to be extremely devout to the point that he may be suppressing something scary. I think we need to make a plan, or else I'm going to get exterminated.
Oh yeah.
And then we see Brandon 3 seasons later literally suppressing something inside that was a lot scarier.
Yeah. And yeah, I hate that for Brandon. I don't know how to say it. Just stinks for Brandon. He probably shouldn't have been brought back, especially so soon. But
You know, though, you predicted the future for the season that you actually ended up winning.
I will give Brandon this, and I love Cochrane, so I enjoy this a lot. Brandon has, I think, let me think about this. He might be the only person that has played with both Coach and Philip. What a combination there. Well, I guess Cochrane also, and Cochrane and Don. There's three of them.
That's true. We gotta do Beach with Debbie next.
Get Coach and Philip in a season and put them on the same tribe in the same beach together.
That would be funny.
So,
honorable mention number 2 before we go into my top 2 confessionals of all time.
yeah.
And this one I said is from the new era, so I bet some of you are already guessing which one it's going to be. And that is Sydney Segal in 41. I'm like the threat of threats. Savvy as hell, good looking. What is it that they hate about me? I just think they hate me. They just love to hate me. They hate me because they hate me. What
Yeah.
a great line from such a great character that just goes home in a tragic way, way too early. Where, and the reason I put this on the list too was that in this era where, like Jeff said, we don't, and I know he took a lot of flack for this online, and maybe he didn't mean it in exactly the way it is because we saw somebody like, say, Maria recently, but um, this is why you want to cast villains.
Yeah.
Cindy is so self confident, and she has every reason to be because none of this is a lie.
Yeah.
And she just makes excellent television every single week that she was on the season.
Yeah. And I will say, I'll get sidetracked a little bit here. The Probst not saying we're not casting villains thing got taken out of context. Nothing's changing. He's not. It's not that he's against players that play like villains. He's just not casting people specifically to be villains and like putting them in. They've been casting this same way for years now, and
Yeah,
nobody's complained about it. They only people just want a reason to complain about Probst, I think.
sure. That would make sense. But can you let's just say that they are potentially interested in maybe having another villains tribe down the road, but with all newer players. Can you imagine something with like Angelina, Victoria, Sydney, and Maria all playing together?
True.
That would be amazing TV.
Yeah. So before you get into your top two, I'll throw my two honorable mentions out there super quick. Another one that just made me smile, Richard Hatch in All Stars after spearfishing. I got bit by a shark, so I bit it back. And he shows where he got bit by the shark, and you see that he tried to bite the shark also, which is just fantastically bizarre. But the other,
That was just amazing. I mean, I know how to defend myself against wildlife if I have to as somebody who scuba dives. It's not really in the diver's handbook of bite a shark if it bites you, but hey, it's Hatch. And Hatch is gonna do those sort of things and made for amazing television and even funnier now to watch on YouTube because Hatch has a tattoo of a nose shark over top of the mark, the scarring that he had from the shark bite.
that's fantastic. I forgot about that. And my second one is just another like storytelling, not from the contestant though. It's from production, just kind of showing how much two players don't like each other. And it's back to back confessionals from two different people, which you don't see a ton. But you see Cass compare Morgan McLeod to an geriatric dog that just you love, but it just kind of lays around all day and doesn't do anything, and it's kind of a hassle. And then right on the flip side, you have Morgan calling Cass a bitter old lady, and she's bitter because I'm better looking than her, and I've always been cute. Just kind of doing the kind of conceited thing Morgan does of I'm better looking than everyone. So she does in a few confessionals, but it's just hysterical. I swear, when they came up with the concept of a beauty tribe, I swear Morgan's personality is the stereotype that they had in mind for that.
It wouldn't even surprise me if this was a theme that they always had kind of like in the background. And when Morgan walked into casting, they said, "We're doing BBB."
Yeah, just because she's so perfect. She's this, and I love more. I don't mean this as a shot, but she's the stereotype that you think of for that. That's just very caught up in her looks, and it's hysterical. Some of her confessionals. I love the scene with her and Casto with the back-to-back confessionals of them just taking shots at each other, not even to each
Oh,
other,
that
but
was
in
great.
confessionals.
And edit that perfectly for the exact time, and you could tell that production was perfectly asking them the right questions to almost make it look like a conversation. So
Yeah.
well done,
Cass also has a
television
lot
wise.
of confessionals that can make this episode.
Oh yeah. We're gonna put up top two for on my list.
Yep.
So number two, we're going with the winner of Survivor South Pacific, Sophie Clark. And this is a quote that I brought up because I feel confessional, because I feel it's really underrated, and I think today there's, I don't, maybe it's started to die out. The pendulum might be shifting the other way back to where it was, but we saw this era, especially between game changers and winners at war, that was so focused on once you get to day 39, what's on your resume and who made the biggest moves and such. And I almost kind of saw that as a downfall in the game. So I went with this Sophie confessional that she says Albert wants to get Brandon out sooner. I feel that everyone is going to go along with getting out Savaii. The last thing I want is to shake things up. Sometimes I think Albert wants to make big moves just for the hell of it. And guess what? Albert is at the end the guy whose Twitter is at 0 votes, whereas Sophie has $1 million.
Yeah.
So it's this game, despite what production has hinted at in the last in the last decade, and what a lot of the fan base talks about online, probably influenced by production, will never, in my mind, be 100% on who took the biggest risk or who got out the best player, but in contrast, who did the three elements of the game the best all around. And in this case, when she's next to Coach and Albert, there's no question that Sophie's your winner.
The thing I love about Sophie's game is that her big move and her big resume was not making a big move. That she kept this alliance together and kind of kept a pagonging happening. Whereas so many people get to the end and their big move and their resume is, I made this big move and took out this threat from my own group. And Sophie's resume was she didn't make a big move. And that's
Exactly.
so interesting. I can't think of another one like that.
I can't either, but at the same time, she knew her season, she knew her jury, and she knew her alliance. And there was nobody in that Upolu group that was going to beat her. They were all following Coach blindly, other than her, who thought he was some religious deity. And Sophie was out using them for votes while playing her own game and knowing that she was going to beat them at the end.
Yep, totally agree. Good for Sophie. And she came back and was killing it on Winners at War also. One of
She
the most
was.
shocking vote outs on that season for me.
Yeah, definitely, probably the most shocking vote out, I would say.
For sure.
And then my number one, I'm sure people are kind of expecting this, knowing where my Survivor allegiances lie. But really, this is the first, watching this confessional, it was the first time that I sat there watching the Survivor and went, holy crap, my pre-merge pick just won the game. Kind of the way that you did with Dee. And that's wrong. Michele Fitzgerald. The way that Nick speaks to me is not the way I'd ever tolerate another man speaking to me in my regular life. And I just want to be like, bro, I know. But I'm going to let Nick baby me and make him believe I need all the help that he can get. And when he can give, and when it's time to make a move, I will. I don't need to be carried, bro. This was Michele really being that the dominant player of the game, that she was able to hide from the rest of her group and play the middle. And you see that really the whole, not, I don't want to say the whole season, but up until, from everywhere from day one up till the Julia vote. Michele is just there, perfectly playing to make sure she doesn't get voted out. She doesn't go to tribal council. She makes this kind of quote to get herself back in the game and know that even when she blows a reward challenge, that it's not the end for her. she's able to still fit into a new tribe and make everybody think that she's on their side when Anna Kate gets voted out on the after the tribe swap. And repetitively in this time, for someone who now we all talk about as probably the greatest puzzle master in individual challenges in Survivor and in the challenge over on the MTV network. Special shout out. Take a look for New Era Challengers with myself and Titi Fernandez on the the Reality Realm Podcast Network. That will be coming out very soon. We'll be talking about a lot of Michelle's next television appearance. But where was I going with that? You look at like the first challenge. It's not Michelle in there doing the puzzle and winning. It's Julianne Anna. She's
Yeah.
not putting herself out there. Then she comes time to make the big move in the game, decide where she's going to be, and she votes out her best ally. Is able to convince everybody that she's not going anywhere, only to watch Ty waste his advantage trying to put 2 votes on her because he knew she was going to win the game. No one else did. And then not only is Ty a 0 vote finalist, but she beats Aubrey, who people thought was the favorite in the season.
To be fair, the way production edited the season, they wanted you to think she was the favorite.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a big flaw in editing, I always find. I like to point to 2 examples of this, and they don't play the game in the same way at all, but it's Aubrey and it's Russell. In that, if production knows that somebody is going to make a return in the next season or two, Rupert almost in the same way too. They really hype the edit up so much in order to try to drive that interest in the next season that it comes at the expense of editing the current season.
Yeah. And I would argue Amber a little bit. Like, her winning season was very much Rob's edit.
Yeah.
And Rob
I'm
doesn't.
just
That
thinking
was
of players who production knew when they were editing the season were already scheduled to make a return.
Yeah. I was just thinking of seasons where the winner didn't get as good of an edit as the runner-up. So Samoa and Ko Wrong are definitely the best 2 examples. All Stars would be my third choice in that, even though he doesn't come back until 12 seasons later. But
true.
All right, so a line blindside first boot. Do you want to go first, or do you want me to?
Okay.
Okay, so you have Austin Lee Kuhn, Drew Basile, and Julie Alley.
Oh, that's a good one. 3 from 45. I'm gonna ally with Austin. I think he would be one that could be beat at the end. You'd have to play a really good game to do it, but it's possible. I'm going to blindside Drew. First of all, shout out to Drew qualifying for the Jeopardy Tournament of Champions recently and winning over $100,000. That was impressive to watch for 8 nights straight. I'm gonna blindside him. I think Drew would be a great ally. Also, just from that Jeopardy run, he's proved to be so smart. I don't want to sit next to him.
Yeah.
And that leads me to first boot Julie. For no other reason than I think she might just connect better with some other cast members and thus be a threat to my game.
Yeah, I hate to do this. I'm first booting Julie because we saw so many people, even Dee, who refused to ever write her name down, say if Mama Julie gets to the end, she wins because she's the tribe's mom and everyone loves her. And smart and like I said, even Dee, who refused to write her name down even at the tribal that Julie goes home. If I'd be interested to see if both of the Reba 4 girls got to the end, because everyone kept saying if Julie gets to the end, she wins, but I really don't see anyone beating Dee that season. But I'm first booting Julie because of how likable she is and how well she bonds with people. Drew's a gamer, and I don't feel like if I'm aligning with Drew, I don't know if I trust the two of us getting to the end together without him either turning on me or pulling some move behind my back to further his own game. So I'm gonna blindside him and align with Austin. So I'm making the same moves as you, just for kind of different reasons.
Makes sense. That's some good ones. I definitely agree with your picks there. I'm gonna go with Nick from Survivor Cologne, Ashley from Survivor Redemption Island, and let's go with Sophie from Survivor South Pacific.
So it was. Can you repeat that?
Yeah, Nick from Cologne, Ashley from Redemption Island, and Sophie from South Pacific. And when does that work?
I'm first booting Sophie. She's the best player here. I can't beat her, I don't think.
Yeah.
Blindsiding Nick, because playing 26 or 39 days closely with him would annoy me, I think. And I'm aligning with Ashley because I think she would let me do a lot of the planning and decision making based on Redemption Island.
Yes. I'm gonna agree with you on aligning with Ashley. I'm gonna take it one step further when you talk about Nick potentially annoying you, and I think I'm gonna first boot him and use Sophie for the big move.
Fair enough. Well, this was a fantastically fun episode.
It was.
And to those of you listening or watching, grab your torches and head back to camp. We'll see you next week. Bye, guys.
Right.